Welcome back to Open Up with Lockie Samuel, and to I don't know what number episode this is because this is going to be launching on when?
27th of June, International PTSD Day.
Okay, and the reason you're here is?
To basically, be an ambassador for soldiers and for other people within the community that probably don't feel worthy or don't see a way out of their problem with PTSD or major trauma, and to actually just see me living my true authentic life, to basically allow them to step up into their own ability to heal or their own ability to grow through being myself, nothing else.
That's amazing. That's first question straight off the bat. Get a little bit real straight away. Could you describe the way you view yourself as a man and or human?
Yeah, I think the same answer as last time was just a human being. Yeah.
Congruent.
Not much else other than that. And I probably, since the last time I was on here, my understanding of myself has gone a lot deeper. The way that I see myself is still the same, but I've really connected with a lot more softer side of myself and a lot more gentler side of myself. So I kind of see myself as more of that complete human being. But yeah, there's definitely been some elements of, what we were talking about before, that kind of tenderness and that gentleness that lives within us now, which is really amazing space to connect to as a guy.
That's probably a good segue into that transition, like what that looks like for you. And I know you're very well versed at articulating how that relates to other people. So let's dive into that.
Yeah. I think personally as a male, my self-image and my self-worth was really attached to what I was doing from an action-based perspective. And that can look like many different ways of problem solving or helping other people or being involved in the Happiness Co or having a loving relationship. So a lot of my self-worth was kind of based off those external factors. And there was always kind of like a level of force that kind of was behind that, like this amazing drive that I always had. But sometimes, that wasn't me being fully whole and fully centered and fully complete. And it was kind of like me witnessing that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much, love I was looking for externally or how much service I gave, there was always kind of like a 1% missing. And I'd done so much work to even get to this point, but this was like a new awareness, like this new layer within inside myself, and I had to go a little bit deeper. So I kind of abandoned it all and kind of gave up everything that was external to me to then find a level of gentleness. And I think the first part of that was to stop moving with so much force, to stop this moving so quickly and just more being and more stillness.
I'm going to stop you there because I remember the last interview we did, you turned up and you're like, oh, I'm just going with flow, I'm just seeing what comes and allowing and letting that happen. And I remember thinking in my head, how the fuck are you supposed to get anything done if you're not forcing?
This was a new level of that though as well too. And so I 100% agree with what you're saying. There's action based, but there's a place of correct action. But then also my perception of what was correct action as well too was probably influenced by a deeper lack of self-worth or external outsource.
Yeah.
So even though what I thought was correct action at the time, there was another layer of zen that I could step into, and I probably didn't have that level of awareness till COVID-19 hit, and through COVID-19 really opening up my space to not have as much stuff within my life. So work really died down with the Happiness Co. We built a really amazing online platform, but that was really sustainable in itself. So it opened up all of this extra time for me to just drop it back, even another gear, meditation and breath work and everything wasn't enough. I could go even deeper. But in that kind of sense, it was this real gentleness and this real tender and this real caring that I connected with within myself, that I was like, whoa. And I've seen flashes of it before COVID, because I was going through some probably heart-related wounding, and I had some really big patterns come up, and I was actually finding that I probably didn't have the emotional capacity to hold myself in that, and there was times where I was looking to externally to be held, but I couldn't actually hold that that kind of feminine or whatever it was within me. I could attach a story, but there was part of my wounding that I couldn't hold. But once I could actually hold that and actually be with that and sit with that, then there was kind of this new door opened up for me to kind of go deeper into my heart and deeper into healing, which was amazing.
I think that's a struggle for a lot of men, especially as we grow up, having that relationship with our mother and then taking that into relationships, and then that relationship, I guess, determining or warping our view or our perspective on what a relationship is. Are you comfortable talking about the wounding?
Yeah. I think that, like, ultimately it's a story. And, you know, it wasn't so much about, like, attaching with a story, but it was kind of like a level of self-image had been created through heartbreak. And it was just like me being able to understand that, you know, it's always heartbreak. And if you're an unhealthy male that's looking for external love or drugs or lying or so much of this toxic behavior, it's always just coming back to a level of heartbreak that your mind or ego doesn't want you to feel ever again. So it projects this image or this creation of your mind to basically run away from this for the rest of your life. And you're basically spending however many years trying to outrun this level of pain based off this image that you're projecting to the world to avoid this. So then it's about, you know, in that stillness, you can really see some of the traps of the mind of actually, like, you know, you could wake up one day and your mind's like, let's go get a matcha. And you're like, well, why? Why do I want to go get a matcha? Or it could be like, let's hop on Facebook. And you're like, well, why? What am I actually distracting from? So many of our wants or our desires are actually kind of just these behavioral loops that are basically producing dopamine and keeping us in like a mental state that aren't allowing us to drop in. And there's so many of them if you actually get to that level of stillness and meditation that you can witness them coming up. So then when you actually start to challenge those deeper narratives within yourself to be like, why? No, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to sit here and be. I'm just going to sit here and be. Then your mind's like, oh, holy shit. Like, we're doing this? We're really doing this? And you're like, yeah, we're actually doing this. We're not going to distract from anything. And we're just going to do this for a couple of weeks and go deeper. And then that's where, you know, there's this massive, you know, the heart-opening experience I had during COVID was like huge. Right here in Belmont in Perth. You don't have to go to India to do the deep work. You don't have to go to Bali. I was in good old Belmont. And, you know, a lot of that had a lot to do with me, like, exploring fear that still existed within me as well, too. So there's a lot of, like, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Like, when you're actually diving into those deep levels of heartache and deep levels of fear, that was huge, like massive. Yeah.
What was one of the narratives that you worked through, and how did you challenge it?
What, like, wants, because I guess your mind always wants to understand something, or it wants to know more information, or it wants, like, to go to the cupboard and eat food, but it's like a want. It's like a never-ending want of something. So I was challenging the cycle of wanting something external from me.
Okay, cool. And I think I've already learned something from this. I think last Wednesday we caught up at Happiness Co, started talking to me about coffee, and previously I went off coffee for about 3 to 6 months and probably had like close to no anxiety at all, when usually, especially before speaking, I'd have some sort of low level of anxiety. And so I know the power of getting off coffee, but I came in with a cold brew in a can that looked like a stubby, and you're just talking to me about like wanting coffee and what's the identity and what's the purpose of it. And it's got me thinking, and on the way here to film this, I stopped in at Caltex, got a coffee, started drinking. I was like, why the hell did I even buy this? Like, why did I do that? And so just having that level of awareness around little things, like getting something as small as a coffee, just cracks open so many layers for you to peel back and understand what you're doing and why. And I guess the deeper level for me is like, when I'm bored, I need to go and spend money, go buy a coffee, go buy a cookie, whatever.
Boredom is an emotion, and boredom is obviously something that people don't want to feel. And boredom is actually like the last layer of protection before you drop into like a deep space, because it's like boredom, there's no activity. I've got to keep active, got to keep moving forward versus actually just being. So yeah, I really hear you on that one. And probably got a lot to do with the tenderness that you're feeling around being a dad and stuff as well too. So
Yep.
Maybe I'll ask you the question, like, how's that for you? How's the transition for you stepping into being a dad and that level of tenderness that you're feeling in your heart? And then are you actually seeing some behaviours play out in your life of maybe avoiding some of the tenderness that you're feeling as well too?
Yeah, well, I mean, like the process of pregnancy was, to be honest, quite similar to previous pregnancy, like with my partner, my former partner, and my daughter to her. I was a horrible man, like went through, tried to force her into an abortion, and then when she said no, stood her ground and stood in her worth and my daughter's worth, or daughter to be's worth, I was just like, fuck you, that's it. Yeah. And you know, I think I carried that over into this pregnancy, and going through it, I found myself trying to sabotage that pregnancy and going into it with the idea of like, oh, if anything happens, I'd be okay if we lost baby. And so I went through that whole process doing that, creating disconnection with my partner because I was saying that openly. And for me, like reflecting back on that, well, actually while we were going through it before she gave birth, I was like, man, I'm really sorry for projecting that on you. That's just my fear around being really loved and held, because I don't feel worthy of love because of how I treated my ex. And so I had to get through that resistance and those blocks. And then like in the last couple of weeks of pregnancy, I was able to open myself up to like loving my partner fully and loving baby in the belly and like kissing the belly, whereas like the whole time leading up to that I wasn't comfortable doing that, just in case I gave her my love and we lost her. And then essentially losing love to me was losing power. And so it's been a really nice process. It's been fucking hard, but going through that, I've learned how to give love without expectation, especially to baby. With her, like obviously she's not gonna give it back, so it's like learning how to love.
Probably
freely.
is on more levels than you actually know. Yeah,
but you know, giving it without having that sort of external validation or return. And the same with my partner, learning how to love her again.
It's amazing, bro.
Yeah, it's been a fucking massive process.
Heart-opening adventure.
Yeah. And honestly, it's opened me up to feeling through emotion. I went to Bridge Experience end of last year, and that's probably the first time I've cried, like actually cried for a long time, like since I could remember.
Yeah.
Like I had a dad who, the only time I ever seen him cry was when he talked about being beaten or like tortured in the garage. Didn't cry when his parents died, so I just viewed emotion as like, fuck, we just don't do that. So I cried at that workshop, and I really haven't been able to let myself do it until my daughter come, and it sort of comes and goes in waves. And now like yesterday I got a good friend of mine, Tanisha. She gave me like an amazing compliment and just acknowledged my growth and the way that I'm helping her, and literally made me cry, do the big old in the car, make it like looking out the window, making sure people in the next lane aren't watching. But like that's something I've never been able to do or allowed myself to do. So it's been amazing, bro.
Yeah, man, that's next level. And thank you for sharing your journey, bro. That's like some deep stuff, and that's really beautiful that you could go through that, and now to come out with a more open heart, and hopefully you get to keep that, stay with that, bro. Like allow that to be your new norm.
It's the wizard. That's why I call you that. And literally, like just driving over here, I used to live a couple streets over when I first moved to Perth with my former partner. And that's like where I was completely horrible to her, in that house. And I drove there, and it just didn't look familiar at all. It's just like, man, I can't believe we lived here for so long, and it just doesn't look like somewhere I've been before. And just sat there in the car outside the house, just looking at it, and just like forgiving myself for the person I was there. And I was like, oh shit, like getting goosebumps now, because it's so real. Like I had so much hate and resentment towards that guy.
And now you got a deep level of compassion for him.
And her too.
I read something really cool the other day that compassion, like I've always been a big fan of compassion, and then somebody's like, it's acceptance and forgiveness rolled into the same emotion. And I was like, that's cool.
It is.
Yeah, and it's like you have an acceptance and forgiveness for your actions, and that's that level of compassion. So yeah, that's beautiful that you're able to have that level of acceptance for the person you were there, forgive yourself, and you were basically showing yourself compassion. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's like the biggest thing that I've learned in like COVID, that, you know, that was the deepest thing that I was lacking, you know, the absence of, you know, me needing to be somebody or justify my self-worth through work is the absence of compassion and care for myself.
Yep.
And then through being, you are caring for yourself on the deepest level. And I could really connect back to like a deeper level of caring for myself on the deepest level through just doing nothing and being. You know, like no breath work is an action-based thing, which then, you know, is normally kind of like something that comes from the mind and still not really an actual force of just being. So then it's still not kind of coming from a true place of care. It's like more of this problem solver type mentality, or this kind of like action based, which is still kind of this very masculine kind of way of being, versus actually just sitting and doing nothing and being. Like, and being in that stillness was then like a next level of kind of, heart opening for myself as well too. So lots of crying going on recently. Driving in the car, very similar, like just full howling. Just like fully just going through me, but like it's actually quite an amazing space to be in, to fully watch the heart doing its thing, fully crying and not actually creating stories or not shutting it down. Yeah, it's actually kind of like very liberating. Yeah,
I think yesterday was probably the first time that I cried and then celebrated crying.
Yeah.
And I listened to a podcast on impact theory about with a someone who deals on that level, but just one of the scientists who deals on that level, and he's talking about the benefits of celebrating and like taking that constant forward action. And that's why the rapid eye movement of that therapy works so well, is because we always need to be moving forward, and then celebrating as we move forward, as we take action, however that manifests for you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's amazing, bro. Yeah.
In a good place.
Yeah. And that's like even the other night I come home, I had a bit of anger in the afternoon about a certain situation, and I was like, I'm angry. So I come home and like actually meditated to get out of anger, but then when I sat there was like a little bit of sadness. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make space for this. So like my mind is like, you should have a smoothie, you haven't eaten much today. And I'm like, my mind's already trying to tap out of the emotion through wanting to like go to eat something. You know, and I hadn't eaten much, but I wasn't really hungry, but my mind's like saying, no, don't feel into this emotion, go make a smoothie. So I was like, no, I'm not going to have a smoothie, I'm just going to sit here and just sit and sit. And then I had to like nearly like have a level of tenderness and a level of care for myself to actually allow it to come out even more. And when I was kind of holding myself and soothing myself, that there was like a further level of openness that I could go to. And it was like my heart or my emotion wasn't actually willing. I was holding myself. I was holding space for myself. And in that, I could actually go to a deeper level, which, you know, I've never actually really connected with that on an emotional level or on a mental level, to be able to like hold myself in that and to have like a level of care. Wow. Which was huge. And, you know, it's me retraining myself, me reparenting myself, me actually connecting with a level of care that I never got taught as a child and that I didn't have in my family dynamic. And that's why I didn't have this balance of caring for myself or like or action based. You know, I was very action based and not very caring, you know. And so now it's having the balance between the two of, you know, whenever I feel like I'm getting pulled into action, and come back into caring, and then the need for action removes itself.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Knowing that you had, I guess, like a darker masculine upbringing or energy sort of influence you, how have you gone about opening up to or giving yourself permission to express like the lower level vibration, like emotions?
Yeah, like probably the biggest thing in COVID was fear. Like I I didn't feel fear from basically the time I joined the army until about maybe 2 months ago, a month ago, or 2 months, yeah. So
how is that even possible?
No. So I've repressed fear for so long, and I guess I kind of like had felt small bits of like fear or pressure, but not like true fear, and that was like me going to Afghanistan and me actually repressing the emotion of fear and then basically not dealing with it. So I think in Afghanistan it was roughly about 270 rocket attacks. I was just a communicator over there, but 6 months worth of rocket attacks, you not feeling them, you pushing them down. Then to go one step further, you using porn as like a disconnection method over there. So you're like masturbating. So then you're kind of like building probably shame and a level of disconnection and a level of like, cognitive ability to be present in your head during masturbation. So your fear has got you out of your body. Your masturbation style has got you into your head, because now you're like projecting like from a sexual perspective into relationships and stuff. So then when I think about it, when I come back from Afghanistan, I had so many unhealthy coping mechanisms. So then, a big part of COVID was to actually get into some of these like lower based emotions. And when fear come across like everyone at COVID, there was like probably a big level of fear that come across the country and the world when pandemic kicked off. Yeah, I felt that, and I'd kind of created this level of space in my life, or this level of like trust within myself emotionally to be actually able to unpack that. And that was quite big. Yeah, that felt like I was going to die. Like that felt really? Like, yeah, that was like intense, man. Like, will you imagine every fight or flight response for 10 years that you've never had, and then you trying to sit in meditation feeling that, and you're just like overwhelmed with like immense fear. Yeah, because all it is like an emotion or energy, and like that just was totally encompassing.
That's intriguing to me. Like you talking about sitting in meditation and feeling all of that energy or suppressed emotion or feelings, whatever you want to call it, through a meditation. How does that work? And how does, I guess, a man who's struggling to tap into what he's actually experiencing get to that point?
Yeah, so I think, there's a few tools that you can use to crack yourself open. And like, let's just say your first, and this is my perspective, this is my personal journey, and what's worked for me, it mightn't personally work for every other guy. But, you need to nearly be action-based at first to heal. Take action to better your life, take responsibility, like, move forward through what as a man, which is doing stuff and problem solving. And, there's two aspects of that. Mastering your mind is a huge one. Breath work is huge in a sense of, the power of breath work personally, of what that allows you to process on like an emotional level within your body, without the kind of mind playing a part of it. But then also you need to put in the work to master your mind, because mastering your mind is what stops you from, taking on new levels of cortisol or stress or any of these things. Like if you're come back from the army or even in the FIFO industry, we can get so addicted to being angry that we're just injecting our body with cortisol or adrenaline, that then we're not actually allowing ourselves to process any emotion or to be a better version of ourselves, because we're just stuck in micro fight or flight and being angry. So if you can master your mind, change your perception of how you see the world, then that allows your body to actually get back into a level of like homeostasis kind of, yeah.
I like that. Micro fight or flight.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you think about it, like if you're a FIFO employee who's worked for 2 weeks in a row, like we've both done, or even in the army for 6 months, that's not sustainable. Like your body is actually starting to say, hey, I can't do this like in a healthy way. I need to start injecting myself with adrenaline, and that's normally with cortisol as well. So then your body kind of goes into this like addiction or like baseline of adrenaline and cortisol to maintain a level of output. And then that kind of becomes your default settings. So then when you go home, you're so used to being in this way of being like at a certain level of like sympathetic nervous system state, or adrenaline and cortisol, whatever you want to call it. It's just a certain state of being. You try and mimic that when you get home as well. So, you want to create that, you can't actually switch off.
Yep. Yeah, that's I think the first time I opened up to the idea of that was when you were talking me through what PTSD really is. So like seeing as that's your area, thriving with PTSD, I guess I'm assuming that's what the book is primarily about as well.
Yeah. Well, no, actually the book's so much about heart, really, to be honest. Yeah, it's like, it is healing journey from trauma, PTSD, but it's like a really like masculine version of to heal your heart. Because ultimately, you know, all of our deepest trauma, all of our deepest pain, wherever you've been, whatever you've done, always comes back to here. And, you know, for you to correct the other parts of yourself, you need to be coming from here in the first place. So yeah, it's like a tale of my perspective of how I see war has influenced all of the people on the planet for the last 4,000 or 5,000 years. Every guy and every girl in this world has have some form of war in their bloodline. So a guy's gone off to war, come back, then brings the scarring of war to the family dynamic, to the female, to the children, and then ultimately that's the kind of what they pass on to the generation below them. So, you know, now we're actually in a world of actually undoing 4,000 or 5,000 years worth of war, and then that's what we're inheriting now as men to undo. So then, you know, you're not just... And you know, that allows you to find a deeper level of compassion and forgiveness for our parents and the people above us who've actually kind of lived those lives, to then give that to us as well. So yeah, it's PTSD, but it's kind of like an activity-based book as well too. So there's actions and activities that you can do in it to better yourself. But yeah, for any women who have a man who has trauma or is in an unhealthy way, if you want to understand how your man's heart is feeling and what's going through his heart and how he's relating to his trauma, there's like a roadmap there for them to get some answers, because yeah, everyone wants answers as well.
I don't know if this is me trying to dig too deep into that, but when you say like coming from your heart, for someone who doesn't know, who's not in this space, who doesn't know what that means, could you describe what you mean by that?
I reckon that there's like, you know, we speak of boundaries, we speak of trust, and the two of the biggest things that we speak of in our relationships and in our worlds and in the self-help like world, that they're so big of labels. So you're like, I'm going to have a boundary and I need trust. And, you know, ultimately there is no deeper trust or boundary that comes from between your heart and your mind. And you talk about responsibility, you know, responsibility is not so much about, for me, my perspective is not like about achieving something in the outside world. It's about taking responsibility for your inner world, what your thoughts are, what your heart is feeling, and you actually creating an environment for them. And when you actually do like a deep level of work, there's this kind of like new level of connectedness that happens with the heart. And you know, this is my personal experience, and in that there's like a new level of intelligence that's born as well too. And in that, you then have an understanding of the mind and the heart relationship and how distracting and how this one can influence us, and then this one actually has our true power and passion and purpose and all the things that come here. So then it's about like maintaining a level of like trust and boundaries between these two. And when you actually have the ultimate understanding of the boundary and the trust between these two, that like kind of shows up in your outside world as well too. So when we think of our partner might be crossing our boundaries, it's like, where are we crossing our own boundaries? And 9 times out of 10 it's like this, because we're not honoring this, we're not honoring our true like calling and the main reason that we're all here, to have a heart, to have an experience. Like, this is us. Yeah,
that's awesome. And that's like sort of reflects what's been going on for me with like being in that Kaboom coaching container. Like, I wasn't showing up for myself fully in that. Like, when we have our coaching calls, I'd go for a walk so I could say, oh, I'm going for a walk, I don't have to jump on a video, or it's going to be too noisy for you or something. And then when I got those loving slaps like, hey, just look at how you're showing up for yourself. Like, where is this showing up in your life? And like, hey, presto, as soon as I started showing up for myself and taking responsibility and committing to me, people started committing to themselves with me. And it's just so awesome to have that connection and to have that awareness. So like with intuition, would you say that comes from the heart? Yeah,
I think there's a level of intelligence that comes from the heart and a level of feeling. you know, and this is something that's very new to me as well too, like to explore this, because like a lot like yourself, I was so disconnected. So yeah, and then it's kind of a level of what feels right in your heart and what feels good for you in your heart, and trusting this of what lights you up and what doesn't, and kind of having the ability to, you know, open this the whole time as well too. But just because something doesn't feel right doesn't mean that there's not opportunity there for growth, and that there's not opportunity there for you to surrender into something. And, you know, one of the things that I've really been working on now is to kind of like not really balk at life, and to just surrender into more aspects of it, so I can maintain this open regardless of what my mind's trying to tell me, that I can just go into it in an open state.
Yeah, and I think there's like a difference between what feels right and what your mind is telling you isn't right, because like now coming into this environment with Happiness Co, like the opportunity's been there so often in the last couple of years, but I've kept saying no under the guise of, oh, that doesn't feel right, I don't want to do that. But now looking at it from this perspective where I feel like I've stepped into self-worth and I don't need external validation to feel good about myself or to like achieve some extraneous thing to feel good about myself. Yeah. This opportunity coming back around with Happiness Co feels right because it's coming from my heart rather than my mind or my ego saying, no, like if you do that, then you're not going to get all the praise. Yeah. You know, you're not going to get all the accolades. And so I think it's very important to bring awareness to like whether it actually doesn't feel right or whether you're making up a story around why it doesn't.
100%, yeah, because our thoughts create our feelings create our actions. So, you know, if we're actually like, oh, this doesn't feel right for me, unconsciously there can be thoughts that are actually influencing your feelings, that then you're just creating a story and basically pushing something away. But then I think there's like a level of difference between heart intelligence that can be felt and heart openness versus, you know, what's not heart and some of the stories we create too. Yeah, so yeah, that's something that you can like be more aware of and self-inquire on, is if you maybe are sabotaging yourself for parts of like experiences or opportunities, to actually just sit with that and ask questions and go a bit deeper on that.
Yeah, I think that's been a huge lesson, is that self-sabotage. Yeah. Thinking I was standing up for myself and fighting the man, when really it's like, no, you just didn't feel worthy of the potential success that might come with that, and being able to hold that love and praise. Yeah.
It's deep, bro. It is. Yeah, self-worth's amazing though too. It's like and I'm too much of a hippie for the bugs. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's really beautiful to be able to be on this journey to get a level of self-worth. And, you know, I guess you and I are feeling really empowered by that to help other men to reach this space. And, you know, I see it a lot in the self-help development industry, that there are so many men out there that are coming from these backgrounds that can not like be accepted into self-help as well too. Yeah. That they have these like dark masculine backgrounds and parts of themselves that they haven't integrated, and that there isn't a huge space for them to. And I see the work that you're doing, and hopefully some of the stuff we can bring together through the Happiness Co to open up an area for these brothers that are looking to transform themselves from those backgrounds.
Yeah. And I feel like it takes people like us really pushing our boundaries first, getting uncomfortable en route to change, and sort of cultivating or creating some semblance of change within our lives to, you know, bring it forward for them to see and go, hey, look, this is what we've created, this is where we've come from, we've pushed our boundaries, we've lent into the uncertainty that comes with vulnerability and emotion. Like, you're safe, you're going to be held here.
100%, bro. And I'm really seeing that in some of the guys that I'm working with at the moment, are just like real leaders too. And you see everyone that's like stepping up to work with me, like from a coaching perspective, is a leader in themselves. And you're like, whoa, this is so exciting, because the stuff that I'm giving them, they're going out to create like this new opportunity of leadership for other guys as well too. And that's really amazing to be a part of that.
That's awesome, man.
And another thing that I'm really excited about is that other course that I've signed up for, that new paradigm of intimacy, the sexuality course. Did I tell you about that?
I think you did. I don't remember what it was about.
Yeah, so it was quite a reasonable investment, which is okay when we have the self-worth for it. But yeah, it was diving deeper into kind of like sexuality and understanding how that is playing out in our world, and then that's actually a course that allows me to go out and hold other people in that as well too. So that's really exciting, because I think that, you know, we have so much like shame and guilt around like our sexuality as men across the planet, and that ultimately that's a big part of what's going to help transform us in a big way. So for me to step into that work kind of is a bit of a no-brainer, and then to see where that leads to is exciting.
That's really powerful, because there have been 2 events that I've been to where nearly the whole room, like every single man in both rooms, had something to do with intimacy or sexuality. And the first one was last year. Everyone was naked in the room, and then we all had to bring up like what one of our fears or perceived flaws were. And nearly every man in that room said the size of his penis. You know, and every man in that room looked around and was like, oh shit, I'm normal.
Yeah.
You know, going back to porn and that warped perspective of what a man is supposed to be and how big it's supposed to be and how he pleases a woman. And then the second event was here in Perth, and then I think the question was, how many men in this room are going through a breakup or a divorce? And every man in that room, there's like 100, put their hand up. I was just fucking blown away. And most, like chatting with some of the guys, like most of the guys I spoke to, was because they were unfaithful, which created distrust, which then led to the breakdown of the relationship. So
it's huge, and you know, it's really amazing that we're in this space to be able to kind of take responsibility and start making change. And so I really see that as a big part of the future. And there's already some really amazing leaders out there, like in this space, that are doing that kind of work. But it's just something that I feel called to do, and to heal probably deeper parts of myself, and to then be able to hold brothers in that as well too. And, you know, I've seen personally through your transformations in breath work, like even in holding you and just, you know, allowing you to breathe into certain parts of your body, that in itself is just such a massive transformation for deep stuff that we've held on to as well too. So it's, you know, it's there, it's real, and it's allowing us to be better versions of ourselves to go through that.
Oh, this makes me smile when I think about it. When we did that one with Daphne, and you just come up and you grab me and you just go, bro, I need you to breathe into your cock. And I was like, what the fuck? Breathe into my cock? What? What is that even possible? And then, like, you know, after having that sort of paradigm shift and thinking about breathing further, like below the diaphragm, breathing into the sexual center and the legs, I've really taken it upon myself to sit in the bath, listen to my heartbeat, and try and like connect the breath to my heart and breathing down into those centers. And it's like the strangest fucking feeling to breathe down there and to like feel that flood go into your balls and stuff. And it's like, what the and most men wouldn't even know that's possible. And
women as well too. But 100% correct, like in the sense of, you know, that's one of the powers of breath work, is for us to connect to our parts that we've disconnected from. And if you've got a high level of shame based around sexuality, you know, we hold that around like our waist. I mean, you can see that from people that are holding excess weight, or like there can be like nearly a level of there's nothing happening below the legs. And then looking beyond that, you can see, there's just like a representation of the human body expressing that they're holding on to something down there. And by you breathing into it, you can start to transform that. You're opening up awareness, you're opening up connectivity again to your parts, and you're accepting parts of yourself on a physical level. And once you kind of get into the physical level of those things, then it can take, you know, you can then integrate the personality or the other things, the emotions that come out of there as well too. Yeah,
and I think this is just something that popped up in my head right now. And I think for most men, especially if we do have a porn addiction, we only really see the penis as something we piss out of, or we beat until we, you know, ejaculate. And so it's not really something that's connected to our being and to, I guess, that cultivation of energy, and especially sexual energy.
100%, man. That's like a deeper level of responsibility that we need to take to be able to have like a deeper level of integration and ownership over our body in that way as well too. Yeah. So fun fact, that's some of the stuff that I've been working on, is like a non-ejaculation and kind of like changing the way that I handle and like engage. Like, it's probably not the most caring word. What would you say? Like going deeper into my sexuality through changing the way that I like masturbate and actually touch myself, and my arousal techniques and those things, and then not ejaculating. Yeah. So, this is not new stuff. This is like Tantra and all these things have been out there for forever. But, ultimately they probably have, probably just put it out of reach of the average day man for them to healthily integrate parts of themselves. And, hopefully this is just mainstream stuff that we can talk about, opening up and making this level of stuff mainstream, that every guy in Australia can actually kind of, start to have awareness and start to look at these parts of themselves, which is really powerful.
I think I watched an interview with Mantik Chia on London Real, I think, and he talks about masturbating and how to do it so you're not overstimulating and then obviously not ejaculating as well. And it's a long process. Like, I do it, but I know men who are used to porn and are used to, I guess, beating the meat until they like ejaculate in like 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever. I think there's that fear of going into a masturbation process that takes longer, that's, I guess, more aligned with honoring yourself rather than like using yourself, because it does take so long and because we are so...
One of the most important things is presence, and then for them to feel for that long in that space is, uncomfortable, because they don't want to feel at all. So, the wham bam thank you ma'am is more of like a dopamine hit, and you actually kind of like just tapping out of something. Yeah. So much instant gratification everywhere, huh?
Yeah.
And such an empowering thing to be able to like be connected to that part of yourself and then put it into your purpose. So like at the Happiness Co and the book and stuff that I'm publishing at the moment, like I'm connecting to that energy and I'm using it for that. It's like my why and channeling it into that. Yeah.
I love the idea of sexual energy and just building it up, like especially when you get horny or you have sex but don't ejaculate, and then like the level of energy you have for creativity is just fucking insane. Like, I know that if I have sex, I don't ejaculate, and I go and like tackle something like write or try and do a video, usually it just comes out. It's just snappy. I'm just like, fuck, I want to do this forever. And until I realize, like, oh shit, that means I'm not. But like, how has that been for you, that process?
I think it's been a very unfolding one. So probably over the last 12 months, I've really like experimented with that as well. And I think sometimes when we're actually holding in our ejaculation as well, it can kind of bring up some unhealed parts of ourselves. So there can be emotions or parts of our personality or trauma or all of these things that we haven't like integrated, and then so when we sit on this big volcano of sexual energy, it can kind of like bring up whatever needs to be witnessed. So that was probably the first part of that, of allowing myself to do that, and then also just like seeing how triggering like it can be in that male and female dynamic of when I go into work on my sexuality and when I place of strong emphasis on my sexuality, not so much on the female side of things, what that looks like, and just how like related they are. So that was kind of another learning experience as well too. And then probably the last bit is just like, you got to have a strong enough why, and probably got to be held in some kind of container as well too, because when you're actually trying to harness one of the strongest forces that's known to the world, by yourself, by you actually having a level of mentorship or having some kind of container around you is really important for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I feel like, especially for men, the idea of withholding ejaculation, especially with your significant other in that intimate environment, that means there's no means to an end. for that experience, so you're not going into it with an outcome in mind, and therefore you're just in it for the experience itself.
Present,
so present, which a lot of us aren't. Like, I know so many dudes who, especially like myself, like need to tell a story while they're having sex, or need to fantasize about porn while they're having sex.
I had my first sexual experience when I was 11 years old with two girls that come and had sex with me. So they're like, let's have sex. And you know, I actually went and communicated with these girls again, like not that long ago, and reached out to them, and they'd been sexually abused, you know, and like they couldn't even remember that incident because they'd so like shut down from like childhood sexual trauma that they couldn't even remember it at all. I was like, well, I remembered it. And I remembered it because it shaped every sexual experience I had for the next 30 years, because every time I went into sexual interaction with a girl, I was this 11-year-old confused kid who wanted to be good at sex. So then I'd be like trying to please my partner for validation, for, you know, to be good in bed, so then I could make this 11-year-old boy not feel confused and like scared. And then that was for 30 years. Wow. You know, like, and there's that level of like engaging in sexual activity without truly being present, because there's so much like of the past that we hold on to in everything that we do, and we take that to, you know, all of our like encounters, or all of our sexual experiences. Or for me personally, is pretty eye-opening, that one.
And I found the same as well, like with my sexual experience from like 8 to 10, and then reaching back out to him and him being like, whoa, I haven't spoken about that or thought about that since it all happened. You know, and I reached out probably like a year ago. And so that's maybe 18 years between innings that he just suppressed all of that, and then it ended up coming up like much the same thing. Was a part of a church and got sexually abused by multiple people, just thought that was okay, and then like obviously did that to me, and then just held so much shame and guilt around actually doing it that he buried it.
So massively. So I, as a kid growing up as well too, I was like sexually abused in a public toilet when I was like 15 as well, by another guy. It wasn't like a massive level of penetration or anything, but it was like traumatic enough for me to then have like shame around that as well too. So it's everywhere. It's not spoken about. It's like a level of like taboo, which then creates repression, which creates more unhealthy behaviors, which then creates, you know, more shame, more guilt, and all of these things that are basically the basis of unhealthy masculinity, and the things that we're actually like taking trauma from our past and then, you know, taking it throughout our life, and basically not being able to connect with ourselves, our true selves, based off having so much shame and guilt from the past. And internally we know when we're not being true to ourselves. And usually that's masked with an addiction or masking agents, whether it's an addiction or not. So you can see why this is pretty important work, and why I want to go do this course, and why this course has found me. So I'm just really happy to be able to drop into that and to do that kind of work, and see where that leads. Man. Okay, so what are, I guess, some of the things that you've either implemented or removed to, I guess, improve your quality of life to get you to this point where you're now tapping into the softer, more gentle sides of you, removing this like need for external validation? Probably just taking the foot off the pedal, and just being more still, and then just calling myself out when I want to get called into not doing that. But then also giving myself permission to have like output as well too. So it's kind of like this dance, like of, you know, I want to publish a book, I want to channel creative energy, I want to put it towards something, and I want to be able to get into that. But then also I want to be able to honor myself and then step back into just being, like just being. And I think probably the biggest thing I've been able to implement is like being alone, and finding time within myself to be alone, and really like loving that and really honoring that. And in that aloneness is kind of like that care and that kind of connection to self is being found as well. Yeah.
That's cool. How do you call yourself out without bashing yourself?
It's really big, man. You can't bash yourself. You can't constrict in any form of your life. When there's a level of constriction on your thoughts, that thought's just going to come back with a vengeance. So, you know, it all comes back to that level of trust and those boundaries that you have within your deep self, and like literally watching that thought to basically come up without constriction, to just let it be, to not dive into it. And then also giving yourself permission to actually go into some of those things that you haven't want to do.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a really good example in COVID. You know, I was a shocking old let's get a block of chocolate and smash a block of chocolate on the couch kind of guy when watching Netflix back in the day. So then I had like this want or desire. So, you know, and if I did that, it would reinforce like shame and guilt and me, like, you know, not feeling good about doing what I did.
Speaking to my soul, man.
Yeah. So what I did is actually went and did it without feeling shame or guilty. And that's such a liberating thing. And once you remove the taboo aspect of actually interacting in that, it's basically gone. So like my mind was like, all right, let's go to the shop and get a block of chocolate. And I was like, okay, sure, let's do that, mind. Like, let's go get a block of chocolate. So, you know, drove to the shop, got a block of chocolate, come home, was really present in eating it. If you actually get really present in something, because, you know, there's a lot of science out there around like dopamine and how it's basically taking you out of the body and into the mind.
Yeah. So
dopamine is kind of like your mind. Oxytocin and serotonin is kind of more of being present in your body and different feelings, but they're just receptors within your mind. And so when you have dopamine, you're actually kind of really coming out of your body and into your mind and into this reward system, because how it works is your reward system is based off the past. So technically you can't actually figure out that the block of chocolate is good for you or you want it, because you go into the past to go, oh, what are my previous reward systems? Let me look at the past. So you're actually coming out of being present, because you can't be in your body and in the past at the same time. So technically for your mind to do the evaluation on the reward cycle, you're coming out of your body, you're in your head now, you're going to engage in the chocolate, and then you're basically getting a dopamine hit, which is just keeping your brain in basically a certain pattern. But when you get present and actually eat chocolate and be really present and non-judgmental, non-shameful, you actually realize that you don't like to eat a block of chocolate. It actually makes you feel sick, and that you're actually present in your body. Then you're like, oh, I don't like to do that, because I'm present in my body and I'm not actually in my head with the dopamine. And then you're like, all right, well then next time it comes up, there wasn't the constriction around your thoughts, there wasn't the shame or the taboo around the action, and then you actually realize that your body doesn't like to do that. So then you can kind of like change your behavior just through surrendering and being present in the actual like action.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And removing that shame, like we all have these stories, and removing the shame, which is a story.
Yeah.
When we go through and I guess take action on getting that block of chocolate, we're no longer just validating the story, and then, you know, if we carry that shame, like we eat that block of chocolate, we have that feeling of shame and guilt, and then we need to validate that even more by doing something again and again to repeat the cycle. And so
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Vicious cycles.
Dopamine cycle, man.
And that's why morning routines are so powerful. So everyone's like, let's do a morning routine in the self-help world, is because when you wake up, the first thing you want to do is hop on your phone, dopamine. First thing you want to do is have coffee, dopamine. First thing you want to do is turn on the TV, dopamine. First thing you want to do is basically do everything to pull you out of your state of being into your mind, and then that's how you start your day. And as soon as you engage in that reward system, quicker you engage in that, that's basically the byproduct of your day. So then the more present you are in your body through your...
So we'll...
Yeah, I think I remember what I was up to.
Yeah, we'll wrap that up. So just so you know, memory ran out on the cards, so we're probably going to have to wrap this one up.
Yeah.
Where were you?
So... dopamine, being addicted to dopamine, it driving our morning routine, and then us basically starting our day in a dopamine reward cycle. So then that's where meditation, not being on our phone, is actually going against the grain. That's where cold showers is actually going against the grain as well too. So if you're having a cold shower in the morning, then therefore you don't want to have a cold shower.
Yeah.
So you're going against what the mind wants for something that's good for your body. So then you're actually starting to condition your day and your routine around actually doing what's good for you versus what your mind wants. So then you're actually kind of starting to break down those cognitive functions within the mind, which are really, really powerful. So then your mind won't want to feel emotions, but you should feel emotions based for you to level up or be a better version of yourself. They're the kind of things, the patterns that you can create through a morning routine and through actually understanding the dopamine reward cycle. For all of the science people out there that love to read, there's an article or lots of publications around wanting versus liking, which explains the difference of remaining in the body versus jumping into a dopamine reward cycle, which is really a powerful read and really important to understand this level of relationship between our body, our heart, and our mind. And when you can actually see what the mind's trying to do for dopamine, or doing sometimes the disconnect as well too. So, if you've got a level of emotional trauma that you don't want to process, your mind can say dopamine, and then that numbs you out. So you're like, I'll go eat, or I'll go to the cupboard, or I'll go do something else, or I'll go exercise, or go to the gym. And your dopamine is a way of tapping out of what you don't want to feel as well too. Yeah.
That's cool. What are you most grateful for right now?
Our new little studio.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so wicked, man. I love it.
I think it was important to set up this space so when I go into the container of Warriors War and helping people have a growth mindset for PTSD, that I can have this space to drop in to help people do that. So yeah, it's cool. And this is me spending my money on just being of service and wanting to help people that have been through that as well too. So yeah, that's important to me.
It's amazing.
Yeah, right? And that's really filling me up.
Before we run out of memory, for this interview, where can people find you and the book? Because when this comes out, I'm assuming the book will be out. Yeah. So you can go to warriorswar.com.au. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and then there'll be a page that you can go to buy the book, and then you'll be able to get access to the course and to the meditations as well too. And then if you're enjoying that, you like that, then there's a further course that you can drop into that has very similar content, but weekly meditations and weekly Q&As as well too, and then more of a community aspect, so you can kind of join like-minded people that are wanting to remove the label of PTSD and be better versions of themselves, and do the work in a like-minded group, which is really cool.
Awesome, bro.
Yeah.
What's the impact you want to have on the world?
Just be myself.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, because through you being your true authentic self, that empowers other people to be them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for being you, bro.
Thank you, bro.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Thanks, brother.
That was a good organic chat.